The Mueller report reveals then Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders lied to the press about Comey's firing. On May 10th, 2017, the day after Comey was let go, Sanders told reporters that countless FBI agents had told the White House they had lost confidence in Comey. She repeated that claim the next day.
Again?
Yeah, this is maybe how she got the job. The next day on May 11th, again.
I've heard from countless members of the FBI that are grateful and thankful for the president's decision. And I think that, we may have to agree to disagree. I'm sure that there are some people that are disappointed, but I've certainly heard from a large number of individuals, and that's just myself. And I don't even know that many people in the FBI.
You said now today, and I think you said again yesterday, that you personally have talked to countless FBI officials, employees, since this happened.
Correct.
I mean, really? Like, really? I mean, so are we talking
between like email, text messages? Absolutely,
50,
yes.
60, 70?
Look, we're not going to get into a numbers game. I mean, I have heard from a large number of individuals that work at the FBI that said that they're very happy with the president's decision.
That was repeated. One lie after another lie after another lie, followed up with more details about the lie, while a reporter is pressing her, and it is obvious.
I love the press.
And this is the thing that has always driven me crazy about Sarah Sanders, and before that, Sean Spicer, and everybody that stands before that podium. You know they're lying. They know they're lying. Everybody watching knows that they're lying, but they just keep lying.
Yeah, I don't know how this presidency actually moves forward, but that's the big picture we'll get to with Congress. According to Mueller's report, Sanders, who was interviewed by the special counsel's team, admitted that her claim of hearing from countless members of the FBI was a, quote, slip of the tongue. And that is one hell of a slip of the tongue, Susan Del Percio.
Over 2 days, repeatedly.
No, sorry.
It sure is a slip of the tongue. I mean, what's astounding about it is that we now see that Sarah Sanders is one of the biggest propagators of fake news. She's the one delivering fake news out to the press corps and to the president, to the people of the United States. And it's disgraceful. I mean, seeing her behind that podium just blatantly lie, but it's something we already all knew. But I do think it opens up another avenue when we start to look at what happens as a result of the Mueller report, and it moves from the legal arena into the political arena and the government oversight arena. I think we're all going to have Mueller fatigue, but as cabinet secretaries come in for oversight hearings, you can simply ask him or her, has the president ever asked you to lie? I think you use all the information that you have as a backdrop to really go after the oversight of all of the agencies and show the incompetency and the corruption at many of the agencies.
You know, Benjamin Wittes, you worked very hard. You worked very hard trying to track this story down for Lawfare, trying to figure out whether Sarah Sanders was lying, what FBI agents had actually reached out to her. And you reported some time ago that, in fact, she was lying. It had to be satisfying for you to find out yesterday that your reporting, like so many other people's reporting, had been proven accurate, and they had actually been the people pushing fake news.
Yeah, I mean, I did take a certain satisfaction in that passage of the report. You know, that the lie that she told those couple of days, you know, it was not one of the most fateful lies of the presidency. It's not, you know, about separating families from their kids or about that, you know. But imagine that you're an actual employee of the FBI, and unlike Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I do actually talk to FBI employees. And imagine that you're somebody among the enormous number of FBI employees who had a pretty deep relationship with the director that the president had fired, and who really admired Jim Comey, and who believed in the leadership vision that he represented for that department, and maybe also who liked him personally and was shocked and humiliated by the way the president had treated him. And then to have the secretary, or the press secretary of the president, go out and kind of misrepresent you, right, by claiming that you know, she had been talking to countless people like you, and they were all thrilled. And you're having sort of your own experience of what the president had done really lied about. And I think that the firing of Comey was deeply, deeply traumatic for the institution of the FBI and for a lot of individuals within it. But those lies really amplified it. And to have her kind of blithely admit to the special counsel's office, yeah, I made that stuff up. I mean, I knew that it was made up when I saw her say it, and I actually spent, as you mentioned, a lot of time getting the documentation to prove that. We had to go to court to get it. But I do think the sort of blitheness with which she just admitted that should change the way people look at everything she says from that podium, to the extent they had any inclination to credit any of it. She really disgraced the podium that day and the logo of the White House that sits in back of her, and we should remember that every time she speaks.
And Joe, Sarah Sanders last night was on Fox News during an interview and tripled down on what she said from the podium. She was basically going on TV to contradict what was in the report. She said, my only mistake was using the word countless, and she again last night called it a slip of the tongue. But she said, quote, a number of both current and former FBI agents agreed with the president. So she's not backing off the lies she told. She's in fact diving deeper into it, but just saying, I used the wrong term, but I stand by the general idea that the FBI was pleased with the president's decision to fire Jim Comey.
And yet we know the one time she speaks under oath, she admits that she's a liar. So when she's talking to the investigators and she knows that she has to tell the truth, the one time she tells the truth in her public service, she admits that she's a liar. Then she goes back onto Fox News. She starts lying again. But this is the remarkable thing. This is the wonderful thing, Michael Schmidt, about having the Mueller report, that we actually find that the man who has used the term fake news the most has been, over the last 2.5 years, the biggest propagator of fake news time and time again. He is proven to be a liar when he says that something that you write or something that the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal writes is a lie. It ends up he's the one who is lying. And you know what's the best part of it all, Michael? The best part of it all is it's his own staff members that are calling Donald Trump out as a liar and actually as the greatest publisher of fake news.
Yeah, and as you see in the Sarah Sanders part that comes out in the report, you see the power of law enforcement, where the administration can no longer make false statements, because if they did, they would get into trouble, and that's how they got at the truth. The interesting thing there, though, is that this investigation concluded without the president having to do that himself. So Mueller never had a chance to ask the president about his intent, and that will remain, simply something that he will be able to explain publicly, and there will be no other consequences when he responds to those questions than simply being called out by the media. There's no backstop to it in the way that it forced Sarah Sanders to make the disclosure that she did. The other thing that I think people should look at the report and try and take away from it, or certainly that I took away, was just how bad the president was at obstructing justice. He clearly wanted to interfere with the investigation.
This was Hogan's Heroes type bungling.
It's unbelievable.
Michael Schmidt. Hogan's Heroes type bungling.
It's pretty clear from the report he wanted to interfere. And it's pretty clear from the report he really struggled to do that. And if he had been more adept and better skilled, he would have done more damage to the investigation. But he was ham-handed about it, and he went about it in the wrong ways and was thwarted time and time again by the people around him. And that's just a remarkable thing, that he couldn't really figure out how to damage the investigation in the ways he truly wanted to.
And that really is, at the end of the day, that is the warning for Americans moving forward into the future before the next elections. This has been a constitutional fire drill, and we can only be grateful that the President of the United States thus far has been too incompetent to cause the lasting constitutional damage that he wanted to cause. But Chuck, let's go to you there, because I just... Wow. Let's put this in perspective about where we are right now, because I had a disagreement with a friend last night who expected me to say that what we saw unfurl yesterday was a constitutional crisis. I said the constitutional crisis would have been if Robert Mueller had been fired. The constitutional crisis would have been if the United States Supreme Court had ordered Donald Trump to testify in front of Mueller, and he refused. Just like if Nixon hadn't turned over the tapes after the Supreme Court said, you have to turn over the tape. That's when everybody's staring at each other and wondering if tanks are going to roll in the street. My personal belief is that we can all exhale on two fronts. One, Robert Mueller did not find the President of the United States in a conspiracy with the Russians. And two, we did avoid the constitutional crisis. We have the Mueller report. Congress will soon have perhaps the Mueller report in its entirety. This now moves from the Justice Department and from the special counsel's office to the United States Congress, who can now, following the Constitution, decide whether to prosecute the president or not. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Joe, I think that's an important point. Personally, the term constitutional crisis to me is a bit overused and a bit hollow. There are things that could constitute a constitutional crisis, something for which the Constitution provides no answer. But to your point, this report goes to Congress, and there is a process, by the way, written in the Constitution to address this issue. Now, whether or not Congress swings and misses, whether or not they flail, whether or not they elect not to begin impeachment proceedings is completely up to them. But there is a process, and so by definition, it's not a constitutional crisis. Moreover, Bob Mueller did his job. He did what we asked him to do, and he did it well, and he did it professionally, and he did it discreetly. And that is not a constitutional crisis. I guess as Americans, we should probably be grateful that the President of the United States did not conspire with the Russians to interfere in the election. But if we want to see what happened, we have a remarkably detailed and compelling report. So at this point, I am deeply disappointed in the way the president and many of those around him have acted. It is disheartening, but it's not a constitutional crisis.
And just to add to that, Mika, the president has proven,
thank God,
once again, he is unfit to be president of the United States.
Totally.
And not only does the Mueller report provide a roadmap for impeachment if the Democrats decide to go down that path and actually challenge the Republicans to defend this sort of abhorrent behavior, but also it gives voters who are going to be voting in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida in 2020, in a year and a half, it gives them a look inside Donald Trump's White House. And so they decide now, is this what they want in the Oval Office and in the West Wing and in the White House and in Washington for the next 4 years? If that is, if they are okay with that, if they can wipe that all away and not even worry about it, then we have much deeper problems than Donald Trump. And so, again, that's a political decision. I always remember, I loved John Roberts' reasoning in the Affordable Care Act when Republicans wanted him to overturn the Affordable Care Act. He basically said, do it at the ballot box. I'm not going to do here what you can do at the ballot box. Well, that's where we are today. Robert Mueller said, I'm not going to do here, and I cannot do here what you can take care of at the ballot box in 2020. So if Americans want to express their displeasure in this abhorrent, immoral public behavior, they've got to vote a year and a half from now, and they can do that.
And also Congress. I mean, we'll have to talk more ahead about Robert Mueller's intention here and what his directive was, but a lot of this is now being passed to Congress. Oversight will step in. Questions will be asked. There will be subpoenas. And this will play out. We have Elijah Cummings on the show later this morning, and I can't wait to talk to him about his reaction to this report and how they methodically plan to move forward. Chuck Rosenberg, Michael Schmidt, Benjamin Wittes, thank you all. Coming up,
thank you all so much, and thank you for your great reporting.
Yep. Coming up, Senator Lindsey Graham has been one of President Trump's staunchest supporters during the Mueller probe. But it seems he had a much stricter standard for obstruction.
I am shocked.
When it was a Democrat in the White House. We'll explain that next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.